Hello everyone, and firstly welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for another Condatis webinar. I want to start today with some brief introductions to some of the Condatis education team who'll be speaking today. So just to get things started, I'm Fiona Edmond. I'm a business development manager at Condatis, and I am the IAM lead for our customers in the education space. I've spent the last 3 years or so working with and getting to know some of the biggest universities in the UK and getting to really understand the types of identity challenges that they're facing. Plamen, I'll pass over to yourself.
Hello, I'm Plamen, one of the identity architects here at Condatis. I've spent the last few years working closely with universities and public sector organizations to modernize their identity systems, particularly around Microsoft Entra and other Microsoft technologies. I've also worked in-house within a university environment, so I've been both sides, the internal complexities of managing identity and how external partners like us can help university to simplify and modernize that picture. Now over to James.
Hi, I'm James. I'm a marketing executive at Condatis. I'll be working in the background, running the slides and making sure everything goes smoothly, and I'll be helping out with the Q&A at the end. So feel free to pop in any questions that come to mind during the session, and we'll answer them later on.
Brilliant, thanks James. So just to give a little bit of context on Condatis and who we are as an organisation for anyone who doesn't know. So we're a digital identity consultancy based up in Edinburgh in Scotland. Our business is fairly niche in that we only do identity and access management, and we build all of our solutions based on the Microsoft technology stack. So we live and breathe all things identity, and we're hoping that today we can share some of those insights with you and give you some practical guidance as you plan your own migration from MIM to Entra ID Governance. As James mentioned, he's kindly going to share some of the slides as we go through, and you can see the agenda for today's session outlined on screen just there. So we'll have a short Q&A session at the end, but if anyone would like a one-to-one follow-up to discuss your own identity requirements, please do just drop us a message after the webinar and we'd be delighted to connect individually. So let's start by setting the scene a little bit for our discussions today. So there's lots of concepts and technical terminology involved in a topic like this, but really in many ways it doesn't need to be made overly complex. I think it might be useful to start by explaining what some of the commonly used systems and tools are within the sector, and then we'll focus on the types of business problems that we're trying to solve and how identity weaves its way through some of these problems. So Plamen, can you start by telling me what is digital identity and why is it something that is important to a university?
I think it's a great place to start because identity often works quietly in the background until something goes wrong. In a university environment, identity isn't just about logging in. It underpins enrollment, course access, collaboration, alumni systems, even physical access to buildings. One wrong detail in a user's profile can disrupt their entire experience. We are usually dealing with a mix of systems like student information system, HR systems for staff onboarding, and virtual learning environment like Moodle, collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams, and hundreds of other applications student needs access to. Managing identity across all of these and ensuring the right access is granted at the right time is a core challenge. And it's not just students. Staff might be lecturers, researchers, supervisors, or all three and even more at once. Handling that kind of raw complexity across fragmented systems is a big risk, especially when some processes are still manual. So digital identity really is the foundation of a secure, seamless university experience. And in today's threat landscape, it's also the first line of defense. We are also seeing a clear shift towards self-service and decentralization. Universities want staff and students to request access to resources like a lab system or research platform without logging tickets with central IT. At the same time, application and service owners are being empowered to manage access themselves, whether that's defining eligibility, approving requests, reviewing permissions, or just by owning access package. That leads to better governance and more accurate decisions because it's the people who understand the context making the calls. Many of these systems, whether it's student information system, the Moodle I mentioned, or a custom-built application contain highly valuable content like research data, intellectual property, or any other kind of academic content. And they're being delivered across a hybrid mix of cloud and on-prem systems. At the same time, expectations are rising. Students and staff want services that are mobile, intuitive, and always accessible, just like the digital tools they use everywhere else in life. But here is the challenge. All of this is happening in a complex security landscape. Cyber criminals and even some state actors are actively targeting educational institutions, and that makes digital identity not just a convenience, but a critical pillar of both service delivery and cybersecurity.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think that really shows how identity is central to every single person within a university ecosystem. And as you said, you've obviously worked within a university yourself, and you've also got lots of experience at Condatis speaking to universities and other education institutions across a wide spectrum. So from your perspective, what would you say are some of the main identity challenges that you see emerging time and time again?
Yeah, there are definitely a few challenges that are coming up again and again across the sector. The one I already mentioned is managing users with multiple roles. Another example for this challenge is a postgraduate student also doing some teaching and maybe even working part-time for a research project. Each of those roles needs different levels of access, and managing that dynamically without creating duplicates or leaving gaps can be tricky. Another common challenge is move from legacy on-prem application to cloud-first model. Universities have hundreds of applications. It's a mix of modern and legacy systems. Trying to integrate identity across that kind of hybrid setup takes time and care and effort. You can imagine that can be costly as well. But probably the biggest thing we are seeing right now, the hot topic, is the deprecation of Microsoft Identity Manager. A lot of universities rely on MIM to drive their day-to-day identity processes. But now they are facing a big question. Can we and how do we move away from it safely? What do we do with all the logic and workflows that live inside MIM? And what's the right solution to replace it, not just like for like, but something that sets them up for the future?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this is a really important topic, and it's definitely one that we're starting to hear more and more people talking about. I mean, I'm sure everyone here is probably aware, but just briefly, can you explain, just for anyone who's not aware, just exactly what MIM is?
MIM, or Microsoft Identity Manager, has been around for a long time, and it's actually done a lot of the heavy lifting for university when it comes to identity. At its core, MIM is a rules-based engine that helps synchronize identity data between different systems, usually the source of truth systems like your HR system, your student record system, Active Directory, maybe even a lot of your on-prem applications are provisioned from MIMs. From MIM, like account or manage groups and handle things like password resets as well. And many universities have built a lot around it. We've seen setups where MIM is doing hundreds of things, provisioning users, managing entitlements, sending notifications, controlling access based on the attributes in the source system. In some cases, it's even stitched into business processes that go way beyond IT. And to be honest, it works. The worst part, though, is that everyone is afraid to touch it as you can break it. But there is the thing. MIM was built for an on-prem world. It's not cloud native. It's not getting any significant new features, and it doesn't align with Microsoft's modern identity strategy, which is fully centered around Entra and Entra ID.
Okay, so if MIM is so ingrained then in many of the day-to-day processes for universities and indeed for other organisations, dare I ask, is it easy to rip and replace?
No, and I think it's really important to be clear about that. It's not a lift and shift job. For most universities, MIM has evolved over time, often organically, and it's deeply embedded in processes that span departments, systems, and sometimes even policies. So replacing it means doing more than just replicating what's already there. It's a strategic redesign, one that involves technical decisions, stakeholder engagement, and clear roadmap. It needs to be phased, well governed, and aligned with the university's broader digital goals. I guess we will talk a bit later about how we break that work down into manageable stages, but the key takeaway is it's achievable. It takes time and planning to do it properly to avoid just rebuilding old problems in a new in a new platform.
Yep, yeah, no, that makes sense. So with that in mind then, let's look at the new offering from Microsoft, which is part of the Microsoft Entra suite. So it's Entra ID Governance. Can you give us an overview of what Entra ID Governance is and some of its primary functions?
Yeah, sure. The natural evolution from MIM is Microsoft Entra ID Governance, as you said, part of the wider Microsoft Entra suite. It's a relatively new capability designed specifically to support modern cloud-first identity needs. Unlike MIM, which relies heavily on custom code and manual processes, Entra ID Governance is policy-driven, automated, and much easier to manage day to day. One of the core things it helps with is the identity lifecycle, covering those tricky moments like when someone joins the university, changes role, or leaves, especially in the higher education where people often wear multiple hats. These transitions can get complex. With Entra ID Governance, you can define access packages, basically bundles of permissions tied to someone's role, department, or even specific project. These packages can be automatically assigned, set to expire, be renewed with approval, or reviewed regularly. So instead of chasing spreadsheets or trying to track down who has access to what, it's all handled through policies. No more lingering permissions years after someone's left, and a lot less manual overhead for the IT team.
Yeah, definitely. The high levels of automation seem like they would be a huge plus for a university. As you said, they'll reduce a lot of the manual efforts and I guess human error involved in some of the everyday work processes and the HR functions. Let's look specifically at the automation side of things. So can you tell me a bit more about how Entra ID Governance automates the identity lifecycle for employees and indeed for other users?
Yes, okay, absolutely. Automation is one of the biggest advantages of moving to Entra ID Governance, especially in these university settings where you are managing thousands of users with those complex and changing roles. So the ID governance helps to automate the entire identity lifecycle from the moment someone joins through the role changes right up to when they leave. Take a role like academic staff in the School of Engineering or postgraduate research student. You can define access packages tied to those roles, which automatically provision access to the right system, applications, and groups. No service desk tickets, no manual steps. And it's not just for joiners. If someone changes department or taken on a new responsibility, Entra can automatically adjust their access based on attribute changes, so you avoid over provisioning, accumulating access through the years, and of course that reduces risk. At the end of the life cycle, access can be revoked automatically using data from your HR system or the student information system, like a leave date or course end date, and the access will be automatically revoked. You can also schedule access reviews to make sure people still need the access they have, especially useful for long-term contractors or research collaborators. It's another challenge, by the way, which I forgot to mention earlier, managing guest accounts. So the result is consistency and control. It's faster, reduces human error, supports compliance, and gives you clear audit trails, all while freeing up time for IT to focus on higher value work.
Thanks, that makes sense. One of the things that you mentioned there was access packages, and I think that in particular is a really great feature of ID governance. Can you explain a little bit more about how access reviews and entitlement management work within Entra ID governance, please?
Yeah, I just realized I mentioned access packages a few times, and this is one of the most powerful features in Entra ID governance, and it really drives both security and operational efficiency. It's all part of what's called entitlement management, which allows you to define access packages. Yeah, we're talking about access packages, basically bundles of access to all the systems and resources someone needs for their specific role or task. So instead of granting the permissions manually across 5 or 6 systems, you create a single package that includes everything they will need, like Moodle or the Microsoft 365 apps, any groups, SharePoint sites. Also, you can decide the membership of the teams that they need to have, the application role, even access to third-party or internal on-prem systems. You control who is eligible, how they request access, whether it needs approval, and how long that access should last. My favorite part of the access package, one really useful feature here, especially for universities with broader IT ecosystems, is support for custom extensions. These let you trigger automated actions during key events in the access lifecycle. For example, when access is requested, approved, assigned, or revoked. So if you need to notify a ticketing system, update an external web app, or even call an API in a third-party platform, you can do that as part of the access flow. It helps tie identity governance into your wider operational processes. And then another thing that I mentioned a couple of times, we have access reviews, which helps you stay in control over time. This can run automatically, say every 90 days, or be triggered by events like department changes or role change. The system prompts the relevant person assigned as a reviewer to confirm whether access is still required, and if not, it's removed. So you get a process that's consistent, auditable, and integrated, and you're no longer dependent on the spreadsheet or the physical piece of paper or other manual approvals flowing through IT.
Okay, so would a good example of this maybe then be something like a researcher who's got access to a sensitive data set, let's say? So instead of just leaving that access open indefinitely, Entra could then prompt the data or the application owner, for example, every 90 days, as you said, to review and confirm whether the access was still needed. And then if it's not, it could be automatically removed.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect example. Entra can automatically prompt the data owner or application owner every 90 days or whatever review cycle you choose to confirm whether access is still needed. What happens next depends on how you have configured the system. You can choose to have access automatically removed if it is not confirmed, or you can opt to escalate it for further review to another reviewer, or simply do nothing and leave the access in place. So there is flexibility based on your policy and risk appetite. And the great thing is that these reviews are delegated to the people who actually own the data or the service, not just your service desk or central IT team, and that makes decisions more accurate and keeps these teams out of the role of man in the middle.
Yep, no, definitely. We mentioned that Entra ID Governance is Microsoft's new, more modern internal identity offering. So can you tell me some more about some more of the features or improvements of Entra ID Governance that maybe stand out compared to MIM? And I think it would be good in particular to have a think about how Entra ID Governance might be able to help strengthen security posture, and potentially also what compliance and regulatory requirements it can help organizations to meet.
A few things really stand out. The biggest shift with Entra ID governance compared to MIM is that it's built with modern security and compliance needs in mind right from the start. The first standout is delegation. In MIM, everything tends to route back through the central team, service desk or central IT team that I'm mentioning many times now,
Yep.
which becomes a bottleneck. With Entra ID governance, you delegate access governance to the people who own the application or the service. that not only strengthens accountability, but also improves the efficiency, which another thing, I'm probably repeating myself. The second big strength is around automation and compliance. You can define policies that automatically provision access when someone joins, adjust it when they change roles, and revoke it when they leave without the manual intervention. Access reviews can also be scheduled to run regularly, and the system keeps a full audit trail of decision and changes.
Okay, so I guess that would be really important for universities that need to meet regulatory requirements for things like GDPR, maybe ISO 27001, or even NCSC guidelines for managing sensitive data, I guess especially in a research context.
Yes, as you mentioned, that's a huge advantage when it comes to meeting regulation like this, especially in environment handling sensitive research or even just personal data. And just to add to that list, the third key strength is integration. Entra supports modern protocols like OpenID Connect, OO2, and SCIM for provisioning, and it works natively with services like Microsoft 365, any Azure services, and an increasing number of third-party SaaS platforms. So instead to stitching together point solutions, you can deliver a consistent, secure identity experience across your environment. In short, identity governance isn't just a replacement for MIM. It's a complete rethink of how identity governance should work in a modern university.
Yep, no, great, thank you. Let's have a look at another future-proofing element of identity governance then. So we've touched on MIM being built for an on-prem world. So how does Entra ID Governance support both cloud-based and on-prem applications?
Yeah, I know it's a really important question, because while universities are moving towards cloud first, most still have a number of critical systems that are on-prem or only partially cloud enabled. Entra ID Governance and Entra ID is built to support this kind of hybrid environment, and there are three features that make that possible. First, again, another new feature that has been recently enabled by Microsoft, that's the group write back. If you're managing access packages or dynamic groups in Entra ID, group write back allows you to sync those groups back into on-prem Active Directory. That means you can still enforce access policies for legacy or on-prem applications that depend on Active Directory, even if the governance is managed in the cloud. Second, there is Entra Private Access. This is Microsoft's modern take on zero trust network access. It allows users to securely access on-prem applications without needing a traditional VPN. Access is still governed through Entra using the same policies, conditions, and monitoring as you would apply to a cloud app. Third is the SCIM to legacy that can automate user provisioning and deprovisioning to legacy systems that do not support modern integration protocols. So together, these features mean you can manage access consistently, securely across both cloud and the on-prem systems using just one central governance model.
Cool, thank you. I think that probably gives us a really good understanding then of the purpose and functionality offered from Entra ID Governance. So let's take a second to move on and have a think about some of, well, what I like to think of as some of the more exciting stuff. So how a university might start to put some of this into practice now. So can you tell us a little bit more about where might be a good starting point for a university if this is something that they were going to do? Where would be a good first place for them to focus on?
I really like this part of the conversation because this is where things move from concept to reality.
Yep.
The very first step I would recommend to any university is to take a proper look at the current state. Most institutions using MIM have been building on top of it for years, adding layers of logic, custom scripts, additional integrations, and often the full picture only lives in the heads of one or two key people. So before you even think about technology decisions, it's essential to map out what's there today, what's being provisioned, what systems are in scope, what rules are driving access, and which processes are still relying on manual interventions. Once we've got that picture, we can start to define what a realistic and effective future state looks like. That's where we work closely with universities to co-design a solution, not just lift and shift MIM into the cloud, but actually rethinking how identity should work securely, efficiently, and in a way that supports the university's wider digital strategy.
So it's maybe worth mentioning here as well that back in February, Gartner published a really useful report called Peer Lessons Learned, which was a piece on IGA implementations and had a lot of really valuable insight. So we'll be sharing complimentary access in the next couple of weeks to this report. So please do subscribe to the Condatis newsletter, and then we can let you know as soon as that's available and share it around more widely.
Yes, it was a great read, and it lineups really closely with what we have been seeing in our university engagements. There are 5 common lessons that always come up.
Let's hear them. What's on your list?
Okay. First, first, get the right people involved early. Identity governance affects so many parts of the university: HR, student systems and admission, IT, and security. So having those voices at the table from the start really helps. Second, run a proof of concept. It's a low risk way to test assumptions and make sure the solution fits your environment. Third, take a serious look at your identity data. It's often messy or split across systems, and that can cause real friction later if it is not addressed early. Fourth, lean into best practices. Entra ID Governance comes with a lot of proven policies, templates, and patterns that can be used out of the box. A good example is the out-of-the-box ready lifecycle workflows and built-in tasks. And fifth, plan for sustainability. A successful project isn't just about delivering features, it's about enabling your internal teams to own and evolve the solution over time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when you layer in things like internal governance, approvals, procurement, and technical constraints, the best way that we've seen this work is certainly by breaking things into smaller, more focused work packages.
Exactly. At Condatis, we usually approach it in 5 phases, and we try to align that with a realistic delivery timeline for higher education. What we typically see is a discovery and planning stage. Usually takes between 3 and 4 weeks. That includes stakeholder workshops, current state mapping, and early architectural thinking. Proof of concept around 2 to 3 weeks, focus on testing one or two use cases in your environment. Data and policy analysis often runs in parallel, but allow 2 to 4 weeks depending on the complexity of your data. And then the fun stuff, configuration and rollout. This varies the most. A phased rollout might take anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending on how broad the scope is and how many systems you want to bring in early. And finally, training and handover, which is usually baked into the rollout phase and continues for a few weeks after go live. The good news is that most university IT teams are already familiar with Entra, and its admin tools, administration pages. So this phase isn't about starting from scratch. Instead, it's about working with you to document and agree repeatable blueprints so your team has clear, reusable patterns for onboarding users, assigning access, running reviews, and managing expectations. That way, once we step back, your team is confident not just in using the platform, but in operating and scaling it consistently. So if we zoom out, for many universities, we are looking at 6 to 12 months end-to-end, depending on priorities, internal resources, and whether we are layering this into other transformation programs.
Yeah, definitely. I think that list and that breakdown is really helpful. And I think it gives people, a much better sense of what's involved and how this process could look in practice. Obviously, the process is going to look different for every institution based on their own individual circumstances, but that is, of course, something that Condatis can help with and can help to provide some expert guidance in this area. And it really does, as you said, Plamen, it highlights the importance of starting this early, even if it's just that initial discovery piece.
Yeah, definitely. And even if you're not ready to fully commit to a migration, running a discovery now gives you clarity. You will know what you have, what the pressure points are, and where to start when the time comes.
Yep, definitely. And for us, it really is about just taking that time to understand what it is that's important to the individual organisation, and then to provide, as I said, some expert guidance in a way that complements that. And hopefully this gives everyone an insight into some of the important considerations that's just worth bearing in mind when you're planning for your own MIM migration, and also shows how the team at Condatis can help to support with this. So, our last topic for today is around future technologies. So, one of the most exciting things about working so closely with Microsoft is getting an early insight into what's coming next. And one of the standout innovations is Verified ID, which is part of the Entra suite. So, unlike traditional identity systems where everything is centrally managed, Verified ID is slightly different because it shifts the ownership of identity data back to the individual, enabling secure, verifiable, and privacy-preserving interactions between people and organizations. It's something that always sparks interest when we bring it up in conversation. And although unfortunately we don't have time to show a live demo today, we will be sharing a link to a short Verified ID demo which the Condatis team have built after the session, so you can see this technology in action. So Plamen, I know that we're seeing real interest in this from a few universities already, but would you mind talking us through where this technology could be applied specifically within the higher education space?
Sure. Verified ID is a real shift in how we think about identity. And although the short demo we will link to it isn't educational specific, the university use case are genuinely exciting. One of the biggest is student onboarding. Imagine a student completing a face check or document scan once and then using a digital credential to access enrollment, accommodation, and library systems without repeating steps. It's a better user experience and more secure one. Another is self-service enrollment, where verified credentials can be issued based on application status, giving students immediate access to Wi-Fi, Moodle, or digital discounts even before term starts. Federation between institutions is another huge thing. With Verified ID, students could carry a trusted credential from their home university and use it to access systems and services to another, a big step forward for academic mobility and collaboration. And from a sustainability point of view, many institutions are exploring replacing plastic ID cards with digital credentials that work both online and in person. So looking further ahead, the idea of continuous learner records, where students hold verified credentials for their degrees, micro-credentials or placements, opens up new possibility for lifelong learning and employability. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that Verified ID can also be integrated directly with the access packages in Entra we discussed earlier. So if you want to add an extra layer of verification, you can actually configure an access package to require a face check or credential presentation before access is granted. That's really exciting way to tighten security for sensitive or high value systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really good use cases there, and it's definitely a real area of excitement for us. And it's been great to see that more people are just starting to think about how they might adopt this technology within their own organization too. I appreciate that that was just a really quick overview at the end of our webinar today. So if anyone would like to discuss Verified ID in more detail after the session, please do again just reach out and we'd be delighted to set up a one-to-one session for that and do a little bit of a deeper dive on what that might look like. So as we move towards the end, I am going to pause for a second and bring in James to see if there are any questions for our Q&A that any people might like answered.
Thank you, Fiona. We've got a few questions that were sent in advance of the webinar, so we can run through them. But in the meantime, if anyone else has any other questions, just pop them in the Q&A section and we can unmute you afterwards, even if you want to speak about it. So first one we had was, since universities use a mix of on-prem and cloud services, how does Entra ID Governance handle this hybrid environment effectively?
It's a great question, and I know I touched on this earlier, but we also have seen that everyone is worried about this, and this question always exists when we talk to universities. I guess the reason is that most universities are in that hybrid world, right? So systems are still on-prem, others are in the cloud, and few are somewhere in between. So universities are already using Entra ID, and with the right architecture, it can bring all that together under one roof and can become the central control point. Your users, your access rights, your policies, everything is managed from that one place. Even the apps themselves live in a different environment. I already mentioned, now we have group writeback, which lets us push cloud managed groups back to on-prem Active Directory. Super useful when legacy apps still rely on the AD groups for access. So governance is done in Entra, but enforcement can still happen where those systems live. The Entra private access, which is the Microsoft Zero Trust approach, it allows users to access the internal on-prem apps securely without the VPNs, and that access is fully governed using the Entra policies. That's a big improvement, both in the security and the usability. And another example, I know that a lot of universities have bespoke on-prem applications that do not integrate directly. For those applications, they are out-of-the-box SCIM connectors. SCIM is a standard for automating user provisioning and deprovisioning, and it can be used to connect Entra with applications that are not natively part of the Microsoft ecosystem. Whether they are on-prem or cloud-hosted, Microsoft provides these few out-of-the-box connectors for SCIM to SQL, ECMA, LDAP, SQL, mentioned REST, or any other custom ECMA connectors. So I hope that gives a bit clarity and reassurance for anyone wondering how Entra can support the hybrid reality most universities are working in today.
Great, thank you, Plamen. Another good question we had was, what does ongoing support and knowledge transfer look like after the initial rollout? So basically, how do you help teams become self-sufficient?
I know when you plan your project, you always put the knowledge transfer as one of the latest phases, but it's something we have really built into our approach from the start. Rather than just delivering the project and doing a handover at the end, we prefer to embed ourselves into the university's IT team, forming a joint Scrum team, let's say. That means the internal team is part of all the key decisions, from architecture to how each story and epic is implemented. So the training and knowledge transfer happens from day one, naturally, as we work side by side. And as I've already mentioned, Entra isn't new to most universities. The IT teams usually know the platform and its interfaces, and they are often several non-production environment already in place. So we're not teaching a brand new system. We're just helping to extend their existing skills into identity governance. One more thing we focus on is building the repeatable blueprints during the rollout. Those patterns the internal team can use to continue building the solution, and also reuse and adapt as new requirements come up. I think that really helps set them up to be self-sufficient and future ready.
Just to add on to the back of that as well, I mean, I think one of the things that's really key for us at Condatis is building that long-term relationship. So it's really about understanding what the support ask is from the customer and for us to respond to that. So we've got a variety of different support offerings that are flexible and can be adapted based on, I guess, the internal knowledge and level of expertise and how much guidance a university or any customer needs in that space. And sometimes it can look like just a little bit of guidance sort of as they move through the process, just to sense check and, you know, homework marking, that type of thing. And other times where there's maybe less internal knowledge or experience and expertise, you know, we play a really big role in helping to shape and guide, form roadmaps, do planning sessions, all of that kind of thing. So, you know, we really can be as flexible as possible when it comes to providing support and helping to do that handover to a university's own internal IT teams.
Thank you. So hopefully that answered that question. And the last one we got asked in advance is a really good one, but I can break it down into two parts for you. So firstly is how can universities effectively balance strong security measures whilst ensuring that staff and students can still easily access the resources they need without much friction?
Okay. What we have found works really well in universities is using access package and automated lifecycle workflow in Entra ID Governance. You can define exactly what access a student or staff member should get based on their role. The same example, a postgraduate student in School of Engineering or Computing, and everything is provisioned automatically. On top of that, access packages can be self-requestable with built-in approval and expiry rules. So if someone needs access to a new system or research data set, they don't need to wait on a ticket. They can request it. They can just sign into the My Access page and request it, and the system takes care of the rest securely and efficiently. So that will reduce friction for users while still keeping strong governance and auditability in place.
Perfect, thank you.
I hope.
And sorry.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
And just the second part of this one is, how do you recommend managing legacy non-Microsoft on-prem repositories, third-party IAM tools, and applications in a MIM to Entra migration?
I already mentioned the built-in connectors, the group write-back, and how you can access on-prem applications. I don't want to repeat that, but I think the message and the good news is you don't need to bolt on another product. Entra and Entra ID Governance already gives you what you need to connect those systems in a structured and manageable way. It's all about putting Entra ID at the center as the unified control plane and letting it drive access consistently across cloud and on-prem apps. With the right architecture, it can connect and support any system the universities have.
Hopefully that's cleared that question up then. There doesn't seem to be any in the Q&A at the moment, but if anyone else has got any other questions, feel free to pop one in or even unmute yourself.
Yeah, can I just ask, can you give, so we've talked a bit about what Entra does, and obviously people, those of us who've been working in this area for a while, are kind of familiar with a lot of those features. Can you give us some of the detail on some of the solutions that you've put in, the bits that you design? Around, for example, do you always use B2C for student accounts? Because that was an example I saw, or do you sometimes use full-blown accounts in Entra, and just variations like that, and how you've personally integrated with some of these legacy systems using some of the mechanisms you've described?
Well, when we talk about B2C, do we talk about external identities that are not part of another partner organization or another educational institution or research institution, but just external users that the university would like to give access to resources?
No, I was thinking more of student, how you handle student accounts, whether you make use of existing their existing email accounts, which I guess would be more of a B2C solution, or whether you give them accounts as part of the solution along with staff accounts, but obviously with different roles and what have you. But that was just one aspect of it, really. It was also about just a bit of detail on which of these mechanisms you've used for integrating legacy systems and things like that.
Yeah, I think what Fiona mentioned at the beginning, we're a Microsoft partner, and we work only with Entra. So most of the universities that we've been working with, they already have their students as similar to staff accounts. They will have a proper account in Entra, so they don't use their personal email addresses. But if you, for an applicant solution, a solution for applicants where the applicants are not still students, then you can use B2C to give some early access.
And you have you done applications where you've transitioned from those to the full-blown accounts that you described that most people use for students, which we ourselves use for students as well?
We are working with a university on a similar project where there is a B2C solution that will allow to applicants to register and to apply, and as part of the application process, the system is integrated with the student information system to retrieve information about their status. And the idea is to enable things like verified ID, so the students can fully self-enroll. The honest answer is this is a new technology. Yes, we're working on it. We have discussions with students, but we don't have a project ready which we can share as a use case.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So any other questions from anyone? If not, I'll pass it back over to Fiona, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop it in the Q&A, we can answer it, or send us an email.
Totally, we can do it separately afterwards. So thanks, James. Thanks, Plamen. So that's us at the end of our webinar for today. Thank you so much again to everyone for joining us. It's been great to share some of our insights with you, and I hope that it's helped to generate some thinking points for your own organisation as well. As I've kind of mentioned throughout, obviously after the webinar today, we're going to send round a couple of different bits and pieces of collateral that we've referenced throughout the webinar. And if anyone, as I said, has any kind of individual questions or would like to discuss individual circumstances, then please do get in touch and let us know, and we'd be delighted to pick that up separately after. If there's nothing else, thank you so much again, and bye for now.